We're going to start tonight's show with Ura Soul and Caroline, and we've got a film to show first. So over to you, Caroline.
Welcome to a Stepping Stones to Awareness Basis Project Combined Christmas Special. I'm Caroline Stevens, and today I'm interviewing Ura Soul. Ura Soul is going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about the yellow vests, we're going to talk about class actions. So we've got a film to show first. Welcome, Ura Soul.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Roman, and for the first time in my life I can actually say that I'm proud to be French. So I am a part of the movement called the Gilets jaunes, or the yellow vest, for those of you who doesn't know what it is. I would like today to share with you a little bit of my perspective on what is going on in France. So you would hear here and there that like the French Revolution is about tax invasion or increase of 40% of the basic pension or massive construction that protects house for millions of homeless and severe penalties for major prefectures, or cancel the debt, or politics, or health issues, or foreign affairs, or ending France participation, getting out of EU, ban GMOs, reindustrializing France, normal plans of obsolescence, bans on plastic bottles, or weaken the influence of big pharma, foreign affairs, or much things. But the truth is that the deeper aspect of that revolution has to do with one essential aspect of our so-called democracy, which is that illusion that our voice has meaning. So like in America, for example, they actually spend a lot of time talking about that movement called the Black Lives Matter. The issue that we are having in France has to do with people voice matter. And in our current democracy, we've been programmed to believe that that was good enough to vote for representative to actually make decisions for us. And France is basically waking up to the reality that no, it is not. That the people who are our so-called representatives, who are taking power from our votes and making decisions on our behalf, doesn't really care about what we think, and this has to go. So we're basically starting to study the depth and the issue of our democracy, and decided to put in place a remedy for the current problem that we're going through all across the world. And this is called the REC. We call it the REC, which is the referendum initiated by citizens. So what does referendum initiated by citizens mean? It actually means that we are asking to have a right to trigger national referendum from our own initiative. We're done begging to be listened. We're done asking authorities and governments to do what has to be done, which is like what everyone wants. But you know, like as they are here to tell us what we have to do and what we have to think, and the system is so much more complicated that we all can understand that it's better for us if they're making decision that like it's time, this time is over. Like we don't want anyone anymore to tell us what to do. We don't want rulers, we want to be sovereign. We don't want anyone to tell us what to do. We want to be the one making our own decision. And that very tiny little idea has the potential to be like an earthquake, a tsunami that will go all across the world, and that will inspire people to actually wear that yellow suit and go out and basically stop feeding that system with our tax, with our energy, with our time, because like we are responsible by being a part of this we're responsible of all the consequences connected to that, like the climate change, the extinction of animals race, like all the side effects, the separation of traditional principles, the separation from ourselves, like we are losing ourselves, we're losing our soul, we basically become instrument of production, we are losing our own connection to nature and ourselves and everything. And like there's absolutely no point crying about what's going on if we cannot change the system from inside. So basically the French analysis came to the conclusion that the issue is actually integrated into the constitution. the fact that in the Constitution we don't have a right to trigger a referendum from our own initiative is the key to our own slavery. So the antidote is actually quite simple. We need to force the government to put referendum initiated by the people, by the citizen, to actually be having a right to make our own decisions and learn from our own mistakes. So this is a very simple message for the world. Like, we are not protesting about tax, we're not protesting about inequality or anything like that. We're basically protesting about the fact that we are powerless. That's as simple as that. We are powerless, and we're done with that. We're done with people telling us what to do. We want to make our own decision. We want to learn from our own mistakes, and we want that the people who are in place of power, who still will have to make some decision, will be accountable for what they do. And that's as simple as RIC. Just as simple as RIC. Referendum initiated by the citizens. A referendum triggered by mums and dads, no matter where they are. If they can find, 1%, 2%, 3% of the population of the country, should be able to trigger a referendum on any matter, no matter what it is: financial, political, international relationship, education, health, or anything, and ask to the rest of the population, what do you think about that? Because I don't agree with that politician point of view, I don't agree with that senator or that parliament point of view, and I'm done begging to be listened. So this is the message from the French people. It's a yellow suit. That yellow suit is the color of hope. That yellow suit is the light in the darkness. That yellow suit is a language for the world to stand up and say, enough is enough. We are done listening to you. We are done claiming that we are going to change anything. No, now we're going to impose what we want to happen, and we hope the whole world is going to follow us. Thank you for listening. My name is Roman Light. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And yeah, good luck. We need to change that mess, because none of them are going to do it. Go together, strike, stop doing anything, stop paying your tax, come together, we're stronger than them, and France is showing the path. Follow us, please. Let's change the world all together.
Pretty much, yeah.
But there's lots of parallels between them and ourselves. They've mentioned about constitution. They don't have a constitution in the same way. We actually have a British constitution. So we do have our own sovereignty, allegedly. And that's been eroded by what's happened with Parliament, the Queen, oaths, etc. They're talking about referendum. We've had a referendum and we feel powerless. The politicians are taking everything we have away from us. We feel as if we have no say. We thought we'd had our say on the 23rd of June 2016, and the politicians are conniving and devious and now they're downright dishonest in telling us what we think. They are sovereign. They believe they're sovereign in this country. So, over to you.
Well, I think the issue of sovereignty, as I understand it, is one of the most important subjects for humans to understand, and it's definitely one that we're not taught about in Britain. It's one that's off the table. It's in terms of education, and
it's been airbrushed out of our books.
Absolutely, and I think that when I started to research this maybe 10 years ago, I started looking into it. Most people I listened to online had something slightly different to say. They'd have a slightly different version of history, slightly different explanation as to who was sovereign and who wasn't. Personally, from my perspective, I only ever as a child heard that the Queen was sovereign and that everyone was her subject, or the monarch's subject, and a subject ultimately.
But she has to abide by some certain rules and customs that have gone through the centuries.
But if you're subject to her, then does she really? I mean,
absolutely. So yes, you have all these military people signing up oaths to the Queen. And it's just like working for any boss, isn't it? It's like, when do you get to the point where you actually say, I want to break free from this because I don't believe that my leader is doing what they are supposed to do?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, in order for anybody to be a subject, they have to first have that free will to be in a position to be subjected in the first place. So they are inherently sovereign. There's no way around that. You can only mask it over and try and hide that in some way, and that's what's happened, I think. And people, obviously, once you can alter people's thoughts about who they are and what their nature of their reality is and where they come from and what their power is, then you've effectively altered that power, because if they think about it in the same way, obviously that's going to affect what they do and how they behave. So we only really need to reach children and affect how they think about themselves in that way, and you've effectively controlled large swathes of the planet. So I think it's very, very important that children are given access to, let's say, a deeper level of truth about these topics. And
well, they've taken the Constitution out of the school curriculum.
Right.
And of course, as you say, the more and more people are actually staying on to university. So you're brainwashing, you've got the potential to brainwash from the cradle to pretty mature age.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think about in nature, if we were to be living in a jungle, if we had that benefit, let's say, depending on how you look at it, naturally you'd have bright foods around that would attract your attention. This is a food, it's bright, you eat it. Apples, tomatoes, these things, maybe they wouldn't have existed a long time ago, but the point is we are programmed in a way, probably biologically, to seek out these things. In a modern world, in a modern town, they've removed all of the free food, they've removed all the bright coloured plants usually. In a lot of places all you have are the bright colours of billboards and advertising, and so they've kind of keyed in on every single possible level to actually tap into our natural and innate processes and direct it more towards the people that they want us to empower, let's say. So we're surrounded constantly by different forms of mind control, ultimately, or different triggers, different channels that are intended to cause us to produce the desired outcome for those placing
like
those
triggers, isn't it? And
yeah.
it's like the dog.
Absolutely, yeah.
Pavlov's it's dogs. Conditioning.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because I've done a lot of healing myself in the last 10, 15 years, and what comes up constantly is my time.
What sort of healing's that?
Self-healing involving emotional processing, psychological transformation, detoxification, basically trying to remove the toxic thoughts, emotions and chemistry as well that have built up in my body over the years. And it's fairly easy to clear out your body of chemical toxins, but to actually analyse yourself to the point where you can remove thought processes that are harmful and to process your emotions so that you're no longer weighed down with rage and denied terror and guilt and these things which people are racked with, but they don't even recognise half the time. All of those things have a place and they're all very powerful.
I think it's tricky though these days because we've got the pharmaceutical industry pumping through the farmers chemicals, phosphates, fungicides on our land, and our food isn't the same as it was years and years ago. And so you haven't got, for example, the cancer fighting ingredients, if you like, in fruit and veg that you used to have.
Yeah, I mean, one of them, as the other gentleman said, I saw recently, follow the money. I mean, as I understand it, around the same time that the synthetic fertilizers were developed, around 1940s, I think it was, there was also another group of people who were developing a process using what's called rock dust, which is actually finely ground rocks from certain quarries and areas, which has a very broad spectrum of micronutrients. So something like 90 different micronutrients, which we need and which are meant to be in the soil, but which have been depleted as a result of modern farming practices. So when we buy the synthetic fertilizers, they will have a small subset of different minerals and so on in them, which make the plants grow big and they look impressive, but they don't have the minerals we need to be healthy. And so what happened was, as I understand it, these two kinds of options for how to fertilize fields, we went with the synthetic version because those companies had more marketing power and no one ever really heard about the rock dust. So now that we have the internet, that's changing a bit, and there are actually farms who use rock dust. I use rock dust to grow food. And I
must admit, I've never heard of rock dust.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And there's also another thing called compost tea, which is another way of producing lots of biologically beneficial bacteria for the plants, and you can actually dramatically increase the yield of what you're growing, and it's far healthier for you. It's completely organic, it's totally non-toxic. So thankfully, due to the internet, more and more people are understanding that, and I think that's a big part of, along with other healing processes that are now available, we can actually start to reverse all this, I would say, deliberate damage that's been done to people over the last very long time.
Well, you are what you eat, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, you see that fish live in seas which are basically carrier bag soup.
Yeah.
So they're ingesting plastic. It affects the cell shapes and then you're ingesting it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were actually going to discuss about social media.
Okay, yeah.
And class actions.
Yeah, I mean, my work is a crossover between system engineering, computing, and learning how to heal and evolve and balance the planet. So I run a social network myself, which is called eureka.org, and that basically I put a lot of time into building that up a few years ago, and found that Google, it wasn't showing up in Google. It just wasn't there. You could search for the name of it, it just wouldn't appear. And I knew that it was being delisted by Google. And at the time I thought, well, there's nothing I can really do about that.
But you just didn't appear on search engine?
No, it's just not there.
You actually had to physically put it in?
Yeah, there's some search engines you can find it on, like DuckDuckGo and these other ones that are meant to be more respectful of people.
Right.
You could find it. Straight away it would appear when you search for certain relevant terms. In Google, it just wasn't there. So I spoke to specialists. They couldn't answer me. I tried to speak to Google. They wouldn't answer me. They couldn't answer me or didn't answer me. So I gave up in the end, and basically the only time I ever got traffic to my site was when I personally promoted it on social media, and then people would come and say, oh, this is great, we love this site, you're teaching us, there's lots of good stuff here. But that's not enough. People actually have to be able to find it on Google, really, is where we're at online at the moment, because Google's so prevalent. And it just wasn't there. So I ended up veering off to starting to use Steam, which is another social media system based on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And you actually get paid for using it. And as it turns out, it's a very, very interesting project. So I've been working with that more. I could go in all different directions with this, but I just want to sort of give a bit of background. So not too long ago, Google got the biggest fine ever, I think it was 2.1 billion euros, maybe, something like that, for delisting people, exactly as they delisted my company or my website. They were doing the same to other people, but some of these other people...
Did they pay the fine in the end?
I don't know the answer to that.
I was going to say, these big corporations get fined and then months later they haven't paid any fine.
Right. Yeah, it would be good to know. It
would be good to know. If anybody does now, can they write in, please?
Yeah. But in theory they got fined that, and that was as a result of companies who also got delisted, who had budgets, which I didn't have, to actually fight this in court. It took 5 years, lots of research, and eventually they won. So Google has shown themselves time and time again to be, let's say, they're just not fair. They're not a fair organisation. They're not, there's a very good documentary called Google and the World Brain, which is a few years old, whereby some of the people who knew the originators of Google at the time, before they created Google, basically say, no, Google's not about money. It was never about money. It's about creating the world's largest artificial intelligence system. That's what they always wanted to do. It's still what they're doing, and that's why they're scanning in all the books and they're scanning everyone's communications. It's basically so they can teach this system. So when you look at it like that, and you look at how they censor people online, and there's another document got leaked not long ago called The Good Censor.
It's called what, sorry?
The Good Censor. It was a Google...
The Good Censor. So if you put in The Good Censor into a search engine... Yeah,
that was a Google document that they commissioned from influencers from around the world to give them feedback about how the world perceived them about censorship and Google's position. What does the world think about Google in terms of censoring? What should we do?
Why would they produce a document? Won't they do what they want anyway?
Well, this was meant to be an internal document which got leaked, and presumably it was to promote a new agenda within their organisation, as I understand it. And if you read that document, you'll see that people are generally saying you're doing a terrible job. Google's perceived to be a problem. People have a tough time understanding why they're being censored, and these, the average experience people really do have on these networks. And then they got some guy from MIT, I can't remember his name, but he basically came in, he was like a headmaster kind of thing, like an overbearing headmaster, and he basically sort of said, well, people have proven that freedom on the internet just doesn't work. They're just not trustworthy. We gave them freedom, the American way, and basically they abused it and they became maximally bad.
When did they give us all this freedom then? What freedom... On what definition?
Well, his logic was that the internet was developed in Silicon Valley, and that was ultimately based on principles of American kind of, free speech and all these kind of rights that people associate with allegedly America. And what he's then saying is, what we're now doing is moving across to a European model, which is more based on civility. And it literally spells out that the systems will be changed so that basically people's freedom will be replaced with alternatives which result in civility, which effectively means you can't say what you want, and you're going to have to abide by very strict rules, and so it's very controlled. So they've literally taken a very significant change in direction in that document.
Well, I've noticed that on Facebook, many friends of mine seem to be having lots of bans these days that they didn't used to be subjected to before.
Yeah.
So things are tightening.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been censored on YouTube and Facebook for years, and I've got videos of my comments on Facebook in the last 3 months just deleted, immediately deleted. They're not marked as spam. They just go like a refresher page and they're gone. Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, what I'm saying. They're just gone. Not always, but the interesting thing is, it's often when I mention Steemit, which is a website. I've
heard of Steemit.
So it's the cryptocurrency-based social network that I now help out with, and that I moved across to.
So does it actually pay?
Yeah. So one guy got $50,000 for one post. I mean, it's literally,
Really?
When cryptocurrency was very high, it's taken a big nosedive recently. But
so you get paid in crypto.
Yeah, and then you can cash it out to whatever currency you like.
Do you feel that crypto might end up by just disappearing because the governments want control?
Well, this is when we move on to the class action lawsuit. So. Basically, yes, that there's definitely very large vested interest that would like to bury cryptocurrency. You can see whenever it's talked about in the mainstream, there's usually a negative connotation to it. It's used by terrorists. It's used by drug dealers. It's used by, it's
probably by MPs then.
Well, this is the point. Fiat currency, pounds and yen, and all the rest of them are used by drug dealers and terrorists. And it's not like they're not.
Well, the MPs use shell companies instead.
Well, I mean, there's 100 different ways to hide what you're doing, and ultimately, most of the methods that are problematic that you can identify with cryptocurrency also have an equivalent with fiat currency. So it's not a sane, rational argument to say that cryptocurrency is bad because you can do these things with it when they know very well you can do it with the old style money too. So it shows how desperate they are to try to mislead people into turning against it without doing the research. So obviously this is not something that's spoken about by them publicly, and you have to sort of do a bit of research into it. But one of the very interesting things that's very telling is that in February, Facebook, I think, and Google both launched an ad block on cryptocurrencies, meaning that you weren't allowed to pay to advertise cryptocurrencies on their networks anymore. And considering that, as I understand it, Facebook and Google have about 66% of the total of advertising online, full stop, within their control.
That's huge then, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive. So that basically means then that 2/3 of your ability, if you run a cryptocurrency project, 2/3 of your ability to reach your target audience is now gone.
Does it tend to be more word of mouth now, cryptocurrency? Somebody a friend will say, are you interested?
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's
been the way things will always work to a certain extent,
yeah.
but ultimately being able to reach people through social networking is a very big way to reach people, and it's people get very rich from doing that, selling all kinds of things. It's an established way to make contact with people, but regardless of the effectiveness of that, the fact that they banned it is the important thing, because some of those projects, including Steem, are a social network and a cryptocurrency combined, which basically means that Facebook, by banning those adverts, are banning a competitor from advertising on their network, which is actually illegal. So that's breaching antitrust, anti-monopoly laws. So they're literally now breaking serious laws. And this was explained to me by a lawyer that I met recently, who's out of Australia, who's actually running a class action lawsuit against, as I understand it, Facebook and Google primarily for their actions with regard to this. And he's actually looking to get claims, compensation paid for the sum total losses for everybody in cryptocurrency. And as I understand it, that's hundreds of billions of dollars that were lost because the prices of cryptocurrency nosedived very shortly after this ad ban came into effect. So he's explained to me that it's almost no chance that it would go to court because they would lose.
Yeah.
So it would settle out of court, and then everybody that gets involved in the class action lawsuit would get compensated. So if anybody out there had cryptocurrency in February, January time, definitely go and look up JPB Liberty. I hope that's the name.
JPB Liberty.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, and I'll put the links up and have a bit more information about it. But it's very interesting, and he's very confident that he's going to win. And there's nothing. It's unprecedented, really. We've never seen anything like that. So
I guess it's always the worry, though, with cryptocurrency that the government will take over.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, banks have created their own cryptocurrencies, and they've been trying to do that for a long time. And Ripple, as I understand it, which is now one of the biggest ones. It wasn't.
What's it called?
Ripple.
Ripple.
Interestingly, it wasn't one of the biggest ones, not until more recently. Now it is, I think, number 2 or 3 in the list.
And who runs that?
It's not one that I've deeply researched, but from what I've heard, it's one which was created in conjunction. It was meant to be used in a way for banks by banks, and the guy who invented that or co-invented it has now moved on. He's left that and he's created a new one called Stellar, which is meant to be taking the good parts of that, but more for the people. So as I understand it, Ripple is a kind of corporate version of cryptocurrency, where it's meant to be. It has some good features, but then lots of other ones have good features. But the point is that these groups are definitely, no matter what they say, to try to negate cryptocurrency, they are very interested in trying to use it in some way that suits them. So in terms of the interesting thing though is that in terms of being able to take over cryptocurrencies, there are various ways of doing that. They could invest huge amounts of fiat money into it and buy all the tokens, for example. But then whoever's got those tokens is going to become very rich as a result of that. They could then sell those tokens, and then no one will be using the cryptocurrency. And so, in other words, it doesn't work very well to try and buy out the cryptocurrency, because you're basically just giving your money away to people, and you may or may not control anything at the end of it. People are not stupid. They're going to see what's happening and move on to another one. And that's really the elusive nature of cryptocurrency. In a way, it puts people off because they seem slightly elusive, but that's part of its strength, in that you can't control it very easily. So if we think about pounds or dollars, we have pounds or dollars. You can't just make your own version of it very easily. It's just, you just have to use that. But with cryptocurrency, because it's software, anybody who knows what they're doing can actually just go into the code that runs it and take their own version of it and launch their own one. So if Bill Gates or whoever it is comes in and tries to put in billions of dollars into one currency to take it over, then people say, well, we don't like this version of this cryptocurrency, we'll make a fork, and we've now got this other version, and we're going to run that. And that you can do that for infinity. So basically there is nothing, it's very difficult to take over all of those systems, realistically. From my perspective, it's something approaching a kind of digital version of anarchism, where you've got no rulers. People can come in and try and rule you, but then you just go, no, bye, we're going over here. So it's very interesting, and just as a mental experiment, it's very fun just to watch it and see what's happening. But when you realise that this is also affecting the resources of the planet and actually changing life, it's amazing, really. And for most of my life, I've always wanted more freedom and to see more freedom and to see humans respected and empowered. And this is really the only example I have in my whole life of actually seeing this happen in front of me. So it's been really a roller coaster, but even the downsides and the problems have been fun compared to, the possibility of not having this as a solution, if that makes sense.
So to round up, going back to the yellow vests, what do you think will happen now?
I'm not an expert in French politics or the French people. I do feel like I understand humanity, and I know that humanity needs freedom, and we cannot continue with the populations of the world being held under the thumb of a small minority of people.
Tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah, we've got a tyranny in the UK. And, years ago, I would never have believed what I believe now. Seen, Parliament act with ultra-virus, if you like, signing documents, no debates in Parliament, and thinking they can lord it over us.
I think it's important that we empower ourselves, and we realise we've been giving our power away to people unnecessarily, and that doesn't serve us. It doesn't even serve the people we've given the power to. They think, oh great, we've got this power, but it inevitably pushes them out of balance, and their lives get ruined as well eventually. So usually, from my perspective, is we need to kind of learn, enlighten ourselves, understand the hole that we've dug ourselves or inherited, and then figure out how to best proceed with that. And I see that some of the models we see in software, not so much cryptocurrency itself, but where that's headed, can actually resolve this in an interesting way. We can learn from it and take it and use it to change our political systems. There is one last point, actually. There's an interesting project called EOS, which is
EOS.
Yeah, which is the follow-on project from Steam It. It's made by some of the same people, and their mission statement basically was to make government irrelevant. And they got $2 billion of funding. To
make government irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's...
So, that's a neutral way of saying, we need to make something better. And they're saying, well, we can do that because we've got the technology. They got $2 billion to make it happen. And they said we don't even need hardly any of that. And the way that it works is it's a cryptocurrency in a way. It's an operating system. So it's like Microsoft Windows or Apple's operating system or the Android for people's phones, but it runs as a blockchain. So it's getting a bit technical, but to summarise, it means that you can run a program or a website or something like that from this system, and it has money built into it, and it has governance built into it. So basically, you can have contracts on there, you can do deals with people, and it's all recorded on that system, and there's arbitration built into it. So it literally removes the court process. It removes the things we rely on government and courts completely. It removes those things from the sort of physical realm, puts them onto a system that's totally transparent and that everyone can see all the details of. So it means that it's very difficult to dispute information that's on there, in a sense. And this is a new system. It's only got launched, I think it's barely kind of fully functional. It's getting to the point where it's now, probably in the next year, you'll start seeing more applications for it, and you'll hear, oh, there's this interesting thing coming along, let's try it out, and oh, wow, I've got a new way to do business. So that's...
Shame can't replace Parliament, really.
Well, that's what it basically does, but it's, I mean, I'm actually working with people at the moment who have done a deal with Indonesia, the Indonesian government, to put their election on the blockchain on Steam, so to try and bypass the corruption and in vote counting, for example. So people will actually count the votes. The human people will count the votes. They'll take a picture of the results on the board, and then that picture will be submitted to the blockchain, public blockchain, so the world can see it. So that when they all get collated at a higher level in the system, that can't be erased or changed, because everyone can come together and say, well, here's 2,000 different photos from different villages and towns, and we can add all those up and we can see if they actually match up with what the government's told us is the answer. And they're actually, as far as I know, they're actually doing that. They've actually initiated a blockchain institute to educate the whole nation about blockchain. They've got something like 2,000 or 4,000 universities that are going to be teaching it. So they've fully embraced it. And it's partially a religious thing, I think, because it's an Islamic country and they're very against usury in Islam. And so they're very much looking for ways to clean up the money system. And I think this just made sense to them. So there's definitely these examples happening around the world. A lot of countries are interested in this kind of thing. So probably in 5 years we'll be looking at this and thinking, we can see where this is going, and we have examples and data, and we can see what happened as a result of these changes and opportunities.
So maybe in this country we could have a combination of the yellow vests continued and the system in Indonesia.
I think it's free will. This is a free will planet, and we get to choose what we want. And I think that's what's been missing, is people have not really understood that. And people even claim, oh, science has proved there's no such thing as free will. I would say, no, that's not true. I mean, this is free will. When I move my hands, and that's free will. I'm willing that to happen.
Well, we've been shutting down roads now with our yellow vests in this country.
Okay, I haven't even seen that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's been shut down. I think it was yesterday or today in London. So yeah, it can be done. I
think as long as we can direct that with our heart and we can create what we really feel we need, instead of just being led off into some kind of dark alley, then that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Just before we go, on the chat room, people are looking for a link to that video that we showed at the start of the show. If Ura could give some information on that. Okay,
I'll do that when I go off camera, yeah.
Can you say it, just for the point of view of the live?
Which profile was it on?
Yeah, it's Roman Light Worker, I think is his name on Facebook.
Okay, that's fine. That'll help people on the chat room. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ura Soul, for coming on the show today. And food for thought, the people back at home. I'm Caroline Stevens. This has been a Stepping Stones Basis Project Christmas special. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We've had Ura Soul on the Basis Project before, and last night he was in Stepping Stones, the Christmas special, hosted with Caroline. And you're a systems engineer, is that right?
That's right, amongst other things, yeah.
Amongst other things. And STEAM, make social media make social media great again. Well, maybe you want to explain all that. Well, let's, okay, Ura Soul, thank you very much for Basis Christmas 2018.
Okay, so hi, my name is Ura Soul online, and I am a systems engineer and also run a social network which is for healing, balancing, evolving, called eureka.org. And it's a kind of a long story behind all of this, and I haven't got too much time to be able to fit everything in, so I'm probably just going to skip over a lot of this. But first of all, I'm going to be talking about some technology issues, some financial issues, some health issues, and I should point out as a disclaimer that I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a doctor, and so on. Not necessarily recommending you speak to those people either, but just to point out that I'm not that. So to give you some background, I launched a social network in 2006, which got delisted by Google. You couldn't find it in Google, and that kind of caused me a lot of problems. As a result of that, I had to do a lot of research into Google and the background behind that and the whole industry in general. And I've addressed a lot of the topics that we've heard other speakers talking about here in this talk. I think I have some solutions to some of this. And I've been very involved with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology for the last couple of years. And that's certainly part of it. I've got a lot of interesting things to sort of cover on that. So as you can see from the title here, we've got a sub-part to this. The second part of the talk is just giving you an insight into a class action lawsuit that's coming up against Facebook and Google for their censorship and manipulation of the world in general, basically. So if we move on to this, it helps to go through some definitions because I'm kind of talking about some things that we don't generally talk about. Systems theory, as it says, is the interdisciplinary study of systems. A system is a cohesive conglomeration of interrelated and interdependent parts that's either natural or man-made. And a systems engineering is basically the application of that into real-world systems. So that's what I was trained to do, and I was trained to use computing originally to do that, but ultimately we are a system, our body is a system, the world is a system, so it's made me able to see things through a slightly different perspective, let's say. Blockchain technology is a form of decentralized data storage utilizing a network of computers operated by different entities in different locations working together via consensus, which basically means anybody can have a computer that they run which joins up with other computers to make something happen, and it so happens that primarily that's been done to create new currencies so far. So we have like 2,000 currencies now plus created by average people at home or professionals to achieve different objectives, and it's a very interesting kind of development with the financial world. And as we'll see, there's lots of other ways of using that technology too, including Steam, which is a social network that I've been involved with for a couple of years, which is a combination of a cryptocurrency and a social network, and it's uncensorable more or less. So that's one of the main reasons why I used it. So you'll get paid when you write on there, first of all, instead of, if you want to advertise a product, they will pay you to advertise, you don't pay them, and also it's uncensorable pretty much. So there's lots of plus points to that, and I'll come back to that. So here's where we start getting into kind of more useful definitions in a sense. So as a result of my journey, I've had to learn how to heal myself and learn very important aspects about the nature of balance. And as somebody who's tasked with solving problems for businesses and for individuals, usually quickly, I know that I have to quickly identify points of imbalance so that we can resolve them. And my definition of balance basically is no part or aspect is overpowering any other part or aspect. So that's the same as you could say no people in a society are overpowering any other people, and so on. Or in an engine, no part is overpowered and is failing, basically. It's quite a simple idea, but we don't normally hear that definition, and it's quite good to understand that. And then in the context of this talk, control, I would say, is to exercise, this is from a dictionary, to exercise authoritative or dominating influence over, to hold in restraint and so on. So we're often told that control is a good thing. We must have control. What would happen if we didn't have control? The world would end. I kind of see it more from the perspective that control inhibits, usually, unless it's used in a balanced way. So I'm going to be covering some issues relating to that. Specifically here, control of others is a form of overpowering, and thus it's a loss of balance. And another point that I thought would be good to make is that people talk about, we must have a revolution. We have these, the people in France acting recently, openly calling it a revolution. I would just point out that to me, in my world, a revolution is when you go back to the start, you kind of tend to recreate the same problems over again. So if you look at the history of revolutions, like the Russia Revolution and so on, things always change, the form changes, but we don't get to the underlying causes of the basic problems, so we just tend to recreate them in another way. So what I would suggest we aim for instead is evolution, which is actual real change that's based on the lessons of the past. And we have scientists that say that, well, evolution is a bit random and you can't guide it, or really particularly. But I would say that's really just because evolution has slowed down so much because we've been so injured, we don't even really know how to direct ourselves properly anymore. So we just keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. So these are some key points. I'm very much about creating change, and that's my job, basically, is to come into an organisation and to analyse what needs to be changed and to make those changes happen. So whereas most people probably are on the receiving end of a system, so they're having to deal with governments, deal with corporations, and they're stuck having to use the system in the way they were told how to use it. I'm more used to seeing it from the other side, where I get to create the system and change it. So I can't think of anybody who does this job I've ever heard talk on these kinds of subjects that I want to talk about. So it's very rare to hear somebody who has this sort of background providing solutions that work for everyone instead of just for their employers. And it's also very difficult for a systems engineer to get paid by anybody who isn't a big corporation or a government, because they're the people with the funds making these systems. So I made the decision to not go down that path and to try to help everyone, because I know we're all basically one, so it doesn't make any sense for me to try and just help a subset who are going to overpower everyone else, because they're ultimately going to overpower me as well, so that would be dumb. So a dictionary definition of power is the ability to act, and we've been kind of brainwashed to think that power is a bad thing. We have this famous phrase, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's not true. Basically, power is the ability to act. So for you to do anything, you need power. So power is not inherently corrupting. My version is basically that overpowering is the corrupt form of power, and we need to have balance in the way that we use power, and then everything should be more or less fine. So the key is it's not that power is bad, basically, we just have to know and understand how to use it with balance. Just a recap for a definition of totalitarianism, system of government, this is from a dictionary, that's centralised and dictatorial, requires complete subservience, compliance and obedience to the state. And a subject, which we have with the idea of monarchy, British people are allegedly subjects of a monarch. And if we look at the one definition for that in the dictionary is basically to bring a person under someone's control. So you're literally being controlled by that centralised entity. So I'm all about self-empowerment ultimately, and often people get targeted for attempting to be empowered, and historically groups who have become empowered have been literally executed over the last few hundred years. Actually, the Falun Gong group in China have been very much abused over there and used in organ harvesting and so on. So it's happening today in a really obvious way, and also in very, very subtle ways. But ultimately, really, self-empowerment is based on, to me, the idea of not interfering with other people's lives, and that allows you to be empowered. You're focusing your energy on yourself to make yourself the strongest version you can be, and you're allowing other people to do the same thing. So that sounds like a good idea to me. And being controlled by others usually limits your success. I don't think it's an accident that management is like man-agement. You're basically aging people through the stress of controlling them through management. That's how I kind of see it. Having worked for managers, I can attest to that. And so for me, from my perspective, wars and violence are an outcome of control. So people are trying to control outcomes which they're afraid of, and we end up arguing about that because fear and anger are very much connected. We get frightened, then we get angry to try and protect ourselves, and then we have a problem. Control of others is both a violation and potential violence. And key to this really is that no one really knows exactly what anyone else really needs. I mean, most of us don't even know what we ourselves need in a lot of situations. So how are we going to know what everyone else needs? It just doesn't make any sense. We have to be free to find our own destiny in a way. And just one other quick point before I really get into the details here is just to point out that we've also been very heavily conditioned to think that you need to make judgments. You have to always be judging. It's not good if you don't know an answer to something. You can just invent something. It's better than not knowing. I'm, as an engineer, from the perspective, no, that doesn't work. Basically, you have to just accept you don't know the answer and move forwards and allow that information to come to you without just panicking and judging that something's the case. And when you realise that judgments always deny something because you don't actually know the full truth, you're filling in the gaps, and you realise that our court system is based on judgment, that basically means that the whole structure of society is based on lies pretty much, and we all kind of realise that from our own angle sometimes, but hopefully. But when you can actually understand it on a logical level like this, it really helps to see how radical the change that we need is. I also point out when Michael Shrimpton was talking about the Germans and so on, he likes to blame most things on them and kind of says Britain's, we should be empowered to solve our own problems. Well, it's good to be self-empowered, but I will also point out that Barry Trower, that was just highlighted in that video, has described how the British government, he's very well aware the British government has carried out illegal microwave weapons testing on all subgroups of British population. So personally, I don't vote, and I consider that, if you ask me to choose between the EU or Britain, I would say I don't want to be governed. I don't want anyone else telling me what to do. Basically, it's just quite simple. I'm free, I have my own sovereignty, I'm a free will being, this is a free will planet, and I didn't come here to be directed by someone else. So that's that, really. So yeah, summed up in a way by this, if I give them the power to feed me, I give them the power to starve me as well. So the ability to liberate human populations depends on changing the programming involved, just like changing a computer system. We must address and reform the education systems urgently to do this. And I'm sure most people, everyone probably here has been to school, most people. I had a hard time at school, and it took me a long time to figure out exactly what was going on there, but now I understand we had the Prussian system and the bell ring and Pavlovian conditioning and all this stuff that literally turns you into a robot. So I'm very inspired to help educate people and decentralize systems. I can see this is slightly broken here after converting it to Microsoft PowerPoint away from an open source system, but let's not get into that. So this is the basic, this is how I started this presentation originally. So when you've got systems, you've got the idea of centralized systems, decentralized systems, and distributed systems. Historically, most of what we have is a centralized system. So you have monarchies, you have dictatorial control to some extent. Some central body tells other people and other things what to do and what they can do. Then you have decentralized, which is where there's not meant to be one central core. There's meant to be a smaller number of shared entities that can kind of distribute the power a bit and make it a bit fairer. This is a bit like representative democracy. So we have MPs, and we're meant to be able to go and speak to them instead of having to wait to go and speak to a monarch. We can speak to the MPs, and each of them can respond to us, and it's a bit more balanced. And then we have the distributed system, which is quite unusual, but that's where basically we have total. There's no hierarchy, basically. Everybody has some degree of power, and we all have specializations and skills and individuality, but we're all ultimately free to do what we need to do. And there's issues with all of these. There's pros and cons to all of them. So I've just put here single controlling entity there, several controlling entities, and no controlling entity. So centralized systems are characterized by rigidity, top-down control held in place by overpowering. And you can see this symbol for this kind of structure of group. It actually, I noticed, matches the crown, right? So the spikes on a crown almost show exactly the same thing. I don't think that's an accident. So it's typically unbalanced, so the power is not distributed amongst most people, as we know from history shows us that we have empires and so on that build up where lots of people get abused, and there's typically struggle and there's a wealth and a power gap, and there's corruption and so on. All these things we're fairly well aware of. And interestingly, in software, this applies to systems like Microsoft Windows, Facebook and Google, all of which are implicated in spying on people and manipulating, and they're very much part of that kind of old paradigm. So yeah, one of the most obvious examples of centralized systems going completely crazy would be like state communism, where it's meant to be for the people, it's meant to be the opposite of centralization, but in reality it is highly centralized and millions of people die. I would argue that the Western systems of capitalism and so on aren't that different to that. It's more hidden, it's more kind of fuzzy, but that's more or less the outcome in the long term anyway. So yeah, I mean, all of these systems, governance systems, tend to be backed by violence ultimately as well. Basically we're all suffering from a lack of power, a lack of voice. And what I try to do is to create systems that give us that voice back in a way that makes sense, rather than one that's got these hidden problems in it that, like, for example, with 5G, we're told that 5G is going to help us communicate more and so on, but ultimately it has all these real problems with it. I'm trying to be real about these things and actually produce systems that actually really work for everyone. Decentralized systems are interesting in the sense that they give us the idea that we have a solution to this problem of centralization, but they don't really go far enough. So you've got representative democracy, and we know from experience that that's highly corrupt, highly open to exploitation, often doesn't really result in anything. It tends to be based on begging and pleading, which the court system is. Literally, you don't have the power to make things happen. You have to ask someone else to do it for you. And it's interesting that in software, this is correlated with cryptocurrencies, which is a big subject in itself, but Bitcoin and these kind of currencies, they claim to be decentralized and they're empowering people, but ultimately they get dominated by Chinese mining groups and all these different individuals who have more resources than everyone else. So it's not really a full balanced system in terms of power, it's just a bit more balanced than a central bank controlled fiat currency where you have no power really, you just get to go along with what they dictate to you. Decentralization, so theoretically brings more power to the people. Whistleblowers, court cases, and centuries of direct experience show that the dirty tricks are used deliberately to control power and withhold it from as many people as possible. So to fully decentralize power in society requires empowered individuals, intelligence and understanding, sufficient to ensure that real causes of challenges are found instead of relying on violence and control, willingness to allow free will to fulfill its evolutionary role. And interestingly, if you read into free will online, quite often you'll read alleged scientific studies claiming, well, we don't have free will, it doesn't exist. But I would say, well, when I raise my arm, that's free will. But anyway, all of these 3 points are routinely laser targeted by governments in order to limit them as much as possible, especially when true realization of them would result in less power for the government. So a centralized system essentially knows that it needs to weaken as many people as it can to retain its power, because it knows that a balanced system won't support that kind of hierarchy. And that's really what we've been dealing with for thousands of years, is groups of people trying to centralize power into themselves and try to dumb down everyone else as much as possible. Interestingly, the internet really has given us the ability to see this well, so we're now able to dig ourselves out of this hole a little bit. So then we have distributed systems, which are much less common, and in political sense, I liken this to anarchy. Basically, it's full respect for free will, and it's the ability to participate fully, and with no hierarchy, and has the potential for an optimal balance of power. Total individual freedom, but it requires maximum responsibility as well, and self-empowerment. It requires a high level of wisdom, which we have this problem because of the centralization. We lack wisdom typically as a collective, and it has no single point of failure, which is very important. So if any individual gets killed or corrupt or whatever, then that actually doesn't stop the system working. It just means things change a bit. Whereas if you, on the other end, let's say you have a monarch or a dictator, when they die, potentially that's a big problem, or so on. So from a systems perspective, distribution is optimal if you can achieve it, and it motivates mutual support basically. How you make that happen is open to your own free will, and we're all open to have our input into making that happen. That's a great thing. It's not for me to tell you how it's going to work, right? It's not for you to tell me how it's going to work. We work it out as we want it to work out. In software, you have peer-to-peer networks like BitTorrent and mesh networks that work using mobile phones. I personally don't usually use Wi-Fi or mobile phones. I've got hardwired everything in my house. I used to work for a company that sold shielding for Wi-Fi equipment to protect us from this stuff. So I agree with everything that's been said, most of it with regards to protection from that technology. But BitTorrent is an interesting one because the centralized government's made it illegal because we're file sharing, or you can't watch this TV show, because it hasn't gone through the proper channels. There's copyright reasons behind that, but ultimately I see file sharing really as being like life sharing, as an anagram. We should be free to share what we do in life, and it's very important to share. And the centralized systems try to stop us sharing ultimately. They try to segregate everybody into their own little box where you're not meant to connect with other people very well. Like Facebook, I used the early social networks before Facebook. They were much more social. Social networks now are quite anti-social. They basically bury information very quickly, and they make it difficult for you to be free. So I'm all about creating free systems. So yeah, fear of the empowerment of others doesn't tend to exist in those who live in balance. And so the specific nature of a distributed system is much more open and subjective than other forms of system. They're ideally designed to adapt and grow with our needs very quickly. So I would argue that naturally we're actually anarchistic, but we are not taught that, and we are basically taught the opposite. So controlled mainstream media often mischaracterizes anarchy as dangerous and projects that control must be present. And lots of people think that. I've seen it over and over again. And I can understand that because we usually see anarchists on TV smashing up shop windows, and that's pretty much all we know about them. But are they really anarchists? Well, I would say basically
deliberately put into...
Yeah, in some cases that's been shown with evidence. Anarchy, literally, etymologically, the word means no ruler. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. It doesn't mean go and smash up shop windows. It means no rulers. So I would also say that when you are violent, then you are trying to rule someone else through violence. So as soon as you're violent, you're no longer an anarchist. That's the point about it. You've ended anarchy the moment you tried to overpower someone. So that isn't really anarchy. They might think they are, but I can understand some motivations for what they're doing, but that's not anarchy. Anarchy is very difficult to create, I would say, in our current society because of all the different problems we have and the fact we aren't ready for it psychologically, and we've been programmed to think it's a bad thing. So again, people are placated by belief in fake representational democracy, and I say fake because maybe some of you are aware of Carol Quigley, for example, who was an Ivy League historian in America in the 60s, who was tasked with writing the history of certain certain secret societies, and he published the book. He wasn't meant to publish it. He did publish it, and still don't fully understand how that happened, but Penguin Books pulled it after about 9 months. And you couldn't get it anymore, but people have worked hard to get it back, and it is now available, and basically gives you a whole history of how they completely faked democracy, how democracy was designed since very early on to be totally fake and very carefully engineered out of Oxford University, and all to do with Cecil Rhodes and the rape of Africa, and it's a very long story, but definitely recommend reading his work. And the point is that you're never going to achieve anything through representational democracy because it's not designed to achieve anything. If politics, as it stands, was meant to solve problems, the problems would already be solved. Basically, that's how I see it.
Can we use your system to get everybody to see QAnon? And will your system be able to help with first-time buyers in the housing market? Has it got any asset-based, tangible credibility as a platform? And are you paying tax in the UK? And are you of the opinion that the constitutional law is the way forward in the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of the Bill of Rights, which will sort out all of Brexit's issues and nip it all in the bud?
Well, I'm going to address as much as I can of that. There's a lot to get through here. I'm happy to take questions.
That's the problem. We've got an asset-based financial service industry at the minute. It's all goal-based. Sorry, I'm just...
So, yeah, I'll try and get to that if I can. So we've got decentralized systems, ultimately like Bitcoin, are often seen as a solution, but ultimately they're to some extent a compromise because they can be taken over, they can be controlled, Chinese mining companies and so on. So what I'm trying to do is look for solutions that are a step beyond that. And so BitTorrent was made illegal and one of the main people was put in jail, and as a result of that we had in Iceland the Pirate Party who won certain seats in Parliament as a direct response to that. And Iceland seems to be, in some ways, I don't know too much about it, but it seems to be the only real example of organised people trying to introduce some form of anarchy type logic into things.
I agree with you on that with regards to the osmosis.
So anarchy actually only means no rulers, as I said. It does not support violence and so on. So we can skip through that. Also, one point is that anarchy does not mean no rules, which people often think. You can make your own rules, you can agree to rules between yourself and other people, but the point is you don't try and make rules for someone else. And to sustain true anarchy requires self-empowerment, wisdom, integrity, and respect for life, and so on. So freely and voluntarily sharing things does not imply loss of services or things. So people often assume if I start talking about these things, I'm a communist or I'm a socialist or something like that, and I'm not at all. And because we don't have examples really of a sharing economy, we don't have examples to go by of how do we live together harmoniously without control and some sort of empire building philosophy.
Well, get back to that declaration and then add all your cool stuff to it.
Yeah.
Bang it.
Okay. So rulers don't provide the things we need. We all have pieces of the puzzle. And people need to be free to create their own destiny and learn from their own mistakes, which was echoed by the guy from the French Yellow Jackets video that we showed yesterday in the interview yesterday. So future internet systems that I foresee, so we have Steam, which is a blockchain system, which is a stepping stone, which actually is an uncensored social network, which I help run, and there's lots of good people involved in that. And basically, for a while, people were getting paid more just for blogging than they were in their day job. And there was one guy who got paid $50,000 for one post, and then he burnt a lot of the money because he's an anarchist. And basically, for a while I was getting paid more just for blogging an hour a day than I was for actually working as a professional systems engineer. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Cryptocurrency now is nosedived partially because of Facebook and Google's blocking of advertising of cryptocurrency projects.
Promoting it, and they're playing Dragon's Den and investing $7 million. Sorry, we haven't said that.
So I'm just moving on to the main point here, or the secondary point, which is something you can all get involved with apart from using Steam, apart from using blockchain technology to actually move away from centralized systems and gradually towards decentralized systems. We're moving on to a point here which is quite serious, which is about the present world and actions that are happening to literally stop decentralization happening. And Facebook and Google, they control something like, well, we'll move on to that. They control 2/3 of the advertising online, and they literally blocked cryptocurrency projects from their platforms. And after that, the prices of cryptocurrency nosedived. We had many billions of dollars sold from that. And I'll get into that shortly. But we also have the concept here of DAC and DAO, which I'm now learning about, which is basically distributed or decentralized autonomous communities or corporations. And these are basically potentially the replacement for corporations. So they actually, you don't have necessarily a contract, you don't have an employer, you just have groups of people who come together to function, to serve a function, and it's all able to be managed through software in a way that is, each individual has the power to change ultimately, and you get to choose. So you're not forced to go and live in this country or work under this government or work for a limited number of corporations because there's only so many and they have all the power.
So
Instead, Correct, yeah. No monopolies, and you know, with software you can duplicate things. If you don't like it, you just make a new version, and someone else can take over the control of that. And so we have maximum agility, and that's the key thing. You're not able to get stuck in a hole being dictated to by someone else. And I know lots of people who are fairly confident, intelligent people, universities, academics, people who were around in the dot-com boom in America who have seen all of this stuff, and they say this is the future, this is what they're aiming for. They're looking to empower people as much as possible. So I would suggest definitely looking into that. It's a big subject, but it's something that not many people really know about. You're not going to hear about it from the mainstream. They're going to demonize it as much as possible. So yeah, just quickly moving on. Top tips for shifting the balance would be, if you can, stop using mainstream banks, look more into cryptocurrencies. There's actually debit cards now available that allow you to use cryptocurrencies in shops, just like you would use a fiat currency like pounds or dollars. They're gradually going to start to be more and more prevalent. It's a volatile market, so you need to be careful in what you're doing. Don't put all your money into it and just hope for the best. But I would suggest having a play with it at least, because it is a very interesting social experiment, if nothing else. And Steam has lots of websites that are based on that platform. You've got a YouTube replacement called DTube. You've got a SoundCloud replacement called DSound. You've got nearly all of the main platforms have a replacement. And one of the very interesting things is the next version on from that is called EOS. You've got $2 billion of funding behind it. The stated objective is to make government irrelevant. And literally it's one of the biggest funded projects in human history, and their mission is to make government irrelevant. And so they're making an operating system that's based on the blockchain. So it'd be equivalent of having like Microsoft Windows, but it's decentralized blockchain system. So you can run a business on it, and it literally has mechanisms in it to arbitrate problems, to replace the court system. And so I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it's the only solution I see that's new that actually offers solutions to literally all the problems that we're faced with, or most of them. Communications, economic, arbitration, governance, and so on. It all depends on how that gets played out as to whether that works, but if that doesn't work, you make a copy of it, you make a new version. So we're not stuck with this ancient system that's evolved over thousands of years that we don't have any say in. We can actually choose to adopt and adapt what works for us. And maybe in 20 years' time, we'll have accepted systems for solving problems that everyone loves because they're just the best, and it promotes balance and good feelings and so on, everything that we need. And that's why I foresee happening. I definitely don't want to see artificial intelligence involved. Definitely don't want to see, systems that control humans. Basically, a good system is only one that really respects us fully and that we can change. And that's the key point, I think. Living from the heart, very important. In our own human system, the heart is the balancing organ. It's the part which can balance the thoughts and the emotions when they're bonded lovingly. And most of us have some problem with heartlessness to some extent. Even people who think they're very evolved and kind of spiritually awesome, basically they have some sort of element of heartlessness in them somewhere, even if it's to themselves, even if they hate themselves on some level because they don't think they're good enough, or they lack some sort of acceptance for emotional expression is very common. So I could talk on that for a month pretty much, so I'm not going to, but the last point on here is just talking about open source hardware, which I see as being the future, very important as well. We have to be able to make our own hardware. Miles pointed out that a lot of the motherboards and computers are made by Chinese factories and so on. There was a case not long ago where it was actually found that Amazon servers and Apple servers apparently had a chip implanted in them en masse that made them totally remotely controllable, and that's a big thing in itself. Also, going back to the Wi-Fi subject very briefly because it popped up in my head, the Lancet just published a few days ago in a specialist publication confirmation that Wi-Fi is harmful to health, and that the claim that science says it's not harmful to health is incorrect. And basically they said something like 80% of studies show serious harmful effects from Wi-Fi and mobile phone technology. So I definitely suggest looking that up as well, because the Lancet carries a lot of weight in the world of science, and it's not very easy to just poo-poo it and say, no, this is nonsense. There's lots of good data on that. So yeah, just going to move quickly through the last bits. Protesting is not an act of freedom, it's an appeal to authority. You aren't fighting for your rights, you're slaves begging for longer chains. That's one of my favourite memes, and something that if people understood, they might change their actions. It's good to be seen in public, to stand up for a cause. I'm not putting people down that do that, but if you're actually trying to get change from a government as a result of you doing that, there's limited ability you have to do that. You might have to literally resort to turning cars over and burning things before they even listen to you, and obviously that's it's not ideal. You shouldn't need to do that. the barriers that we are faced with, we have to respond to in the way that works. And the idea is to try to dissolve the barriers rather than smash your head against them and risk yourself getting killed, pretty much. So moving on, just the last subject here, which is the Facebook and Google class action lawsuit. So this says here, 1 comment deleted is a tragedy, 1 million comments deleted is a statistic. Mark F. Stalenberg. So I've been censored a lot on Facebook and Google. I've got videos of my comments being deleted in real time. You know, I can just talk and refresh the page and they're gone. And this has been happening for a long time. And I'm sure there's lots of people who basically use these systems thinking that the world's hearing them and they aren't, basically. You know, it's basically anybody who says anything they don't like, pretty much. And I'm pretty sure it's been shown by Edward Snowden that these governments and so on have got direct ability to enact this censorship without needing to go through any court process or anything like that. They've got direct access to the servers, they just press a button, it's done. So I'm very much into replacing Facebook and Google, and I think that would be good for everyone. And there's lots of blockchain projects that aim to do that as well, and I'm sure 1 or 2 of them are going to succeed. But this particular class action lawsuit is pretty interesting. So I met an Australian lawyer not long ago at a conference who basically has experience of these kind of things, and he's very much into Steam and blockchain technology, and he wants to fight Facebook and Google. And he identified that they've actually broken antitrust and anti-monopoly laws because of their ban of cryptocurrency adverts. So being as Steam and other projects are direct competitors to Google and Facebook in the social media realm, they're not allowed to actually prevent their competitors from using their service according to antitrust and anti-monopoly laws. So therefore, by them banning cryptocurrency ads and blocking comments mentioning Steam It and Steam and these sites, he says they've got a very good case basically to bring against them to show that they've broken these laws. And he's looking for a class action movement to gain compensation for the entire losses to the entire world of cryptocurrency. And bearing in mind that cryptocurrency went down by something like 60% after that, it's potentially a $300 billion lawsuit, which, I mean, I'm not an expert in the finances of these companies, but I'm imagining that's going to be fairly annoying for them, to say the least. So he's saying it would never go to court, and in reality it would be settled out of court. But if you had any cryptocurrency at the beginning of the year, then definitely go and check out. There's links at the end of this for his site, and you can sign up, and it's anonymous. Basically, there's minimal risk to you, and you will get a percentage of the payout. So that's very interesting, definitely. So these are some of his slides. So it says Facebook and Google developed some clever code 15 years ago and have now eaten the internet. Strategic business model of expansion by acquiring potential competitors in the early stages before the antitrust law would prohibit them. So they've got an active strategy to shut everyone else down without breaking the law by getting in early and buying them out. And the cryptocosm, which is obviously all cryptocurrencies, threatens them by introducing competitors that can't be bought out and using a fundamentally superior model to theirs that gives users control over their own security and content and privacy instead of the centralized system that we're stuck with. They control 66% of all online advertising, and they launched a censorship attack, as he's pointed out here, losing 300 billion off the market very quickly, and the ad ban's illegal. So he says it's because those companies operate in Australia, they have jurisdiction. The courts over there have jurisdiction over them, so he can launch the movement there, and it applies to everyone in the whole world. You don't have to be Australian. So yeah, very interesting. It's free to sign up, no win, no fee, and they are also offering tokens. So the more you get involved, the more you prove that you had crypto, and so on, the more you actually get paid out. Interesting way of dealing with that. So yeah, that's his website there, jpbliberty.com, and you can find him on Steam, JPB Liberty, and these other addresses as well if you want to message him directly. And last page is my site, eureka.org. You're welcome to sign up. That's a social network. It's fairly quiet, but there's a big library of information on there that I've built up over however long, 10 years, relating to all the subjects that BASES covers and all the things we talked about. I've actually had very unusual ET contact as well, and these kinds of experiences. So that's kind of why I got into BASES in the first place. So, you know, if you like BASES, you'll probably find stuff on there that you like as well. And you can find me as Ura Soul on Steam or on Telegram if you want to message me as well. So, I don't know, do we have time for questions, Miles, or is that too long? Yeah?
Anybody, and if, as usual, if you're able to turn yourself on.
Just going back to what Fraser was saying, just before I go to that, just if he brings up a lot of subjects there, going back to the Bill of Rights and the British issue with democracy and historic documents. My perspective is that we've denied a lot of things from our history. History's been hugely warped and manipulated. We don't really know exactly what happens. It's written by the winners ultimately, isn't it? So basically, I would say it's very important for us to go back to the original documents, find the things that have been hidden, to find what's really meant to have been happening. But that doesn't mean to say that those documents give us the best solution going forwards. It just means that they give us an insight into what was intended, let's say, and we should take the best from the past and use the wisdom we have from today to produce a better future. Basically, that's how I view it.
Okay. Question?
Okay. I believe that cryptocurrency ultimately is going to enslave us. It requires more and more super powerful computers. This is all rolling in with the whole 5G agenda. You know, computers, I don't believe they're making us happy. What about markets where people are exchanging goods for cash?
Unfortunately, none of this is going to be on this recording.
Okay, one last thing. Also, what about the Israeli control of the high technology sector?
Okay, all right. So there's quite a few points there.
Yeah.
What he basically asked, the first point was, he said that cryptocurrency he thinks is going to enslave humanity. It uses a lot of resources, and it's just generally not such a great solution. Computers are problems for people's health in general. And you know, in essence, surely there must be a better option. He's saying maybe we can just go back to using money and cash. Obviously, it's a very complicated point. I agree that computers are not great for health, and I think it would be better for us to move away from technology in general as much as possible. The situation we're in right now, though, is that we have technology everywhere. It's ubiquitous, and getting people to even move from one social network to another one is hard enough. Getting them to stop using technology is, you know, I mean, I don't even know how you do that, but they don't listen when you tell them it causes cancer. They don't listen. They don't change the diet when you tell them that the diet causes cancer. You know, I don't know how you do it, to be honest, but fiat currency, obviously, is, for anybody who's looked into it, is completely corrupt. You know, whatever problem you've got with cryptocurrency, you've got the same problem with fiat currency, more or less. Very complicated topic. I'm not going to go into all the details. I can do if you want to talk afterwards. The power issue and the resources issue for cryptocurrency is relevant, and Bitcoin and early systems are very power intensive. They shouldn't be used. I wouldn't recommend anyone invest in Bitcoin personally. Basically, but there are newer systems which are completely different, which use much less resources. And a distributed system would be one where every single person runs their own piece of the network. So you don't have any centralized servers at all. So if you've got a computer that you can use to have cryptocurrency on, then you're also helping run the network. So it's not necessarily going to use much power up from that perspective. I know that Facebook a long time ago was measured as using the same amount of energy as Brazil, if I remember correctly. And that was a long time ago. So, you know, who knows what they're using now, but it's important, and these points need to be addressed. I think we can do that, but I think in the future, yes, it would be good to move beyond money completely and just to live as humans, interacting with each other as real beings through the heart, and actually helping each other and learning about each other, rather than, there's all kinds of problems, you know, just from using money. You end up doing deals with people, you don't know anything about them just because you're going to get money. You know, I think it would be much better to become real people. That's a week-long seminar probably, but yeah, valid points, and but I do think that these systems are good enough that they're okay to use. That's my current point.
You need to stop 5G for a week-long seminar, like.
Apparently, if you're going to get shot through the head by a beam from 5G and explode, then maybe. But I'm not really sure that would ever happen. I'd like to know what Mark Steele was saying there when he said that if you get in between a transmitter and the phone, your head's going to explode. I think if that was actually true, then obviously it would never be used, because you would see it happening and no one would use it. So I guess he's saying, if that is true, then he's saying that before it actually gets used, before these devices get used in people's homes, something bad will happen in between then that would be justifying his fear. I can't comment on that, I don't know. But
it's radar, it's military technology. It's
sure.
array. If you look up these terms,
yeah, I understand, but
fatal to the human race.
As an engineer, you know, I'm not saying that this isn't weaponization. I'm not saying that it isn't extremely dangerous. I'm just saying that these things have to be shown scientifically, or at least to experience one way or another. And there's lots of evidence showing Wi-Fi and so on is very bad for health. I recommend not using it. There's a limit, isn't there? I mean, if you say 5G is going to destroy the whole universe, you know, it's like, well, I doubt it, but, you know, people could say that, but they have to prove it. That's the thing.
Okay, thank you very much for...
Cheers. Thank you.
This will be edited and available sometime in about...